The morning sun cast long shadows across the quiet suburban street when 8-year-old Emma first noticed the desperate whimpering coming from behind the old oak tree in her backyard. She had been playing with her dolls on the porch when the sound reached her ears, soft but persistent, like someone crying for help. Emma's mother was inside preparing breakfast, and her father had already left for work at the construction site. Emma slowly approached the source of the sound, her small feet crunching on the fallen autumn leaves. What she discovered behind the massive tree trunk would change her life forever. A skeletal dog so thin that her ribs showed clearly through her matted brown fur was lying on her side. The animal's eyes were filled with exhaustion and pain, but there was something else there too, a fierce determination that Emma could somehow sense even at her young age. The dog was clearly a mother. Her swollen belly and the way she positioned herself protectively told Emma that much, even though she was just a child. The poor creature's fur was dirty and tangled, suggesting she had been living rough for quite some time. Her paws were cracked and bleeding, indicating long journeys on hard surfaces. Despite her terrible condition, the dog's tail gave the weakest of wags when she saw Emma approaching. Emma knelt down carefully. Remembering what her grandmother had taught her about approaching scared animals, she extended her hand slowly, palm up, allowing the dog to catch her scent. The mother dog lifted her head with great effort and sniffed Emma's fingers before gently licking them. It was a gesture of trust that brought tears to the little girl's eyes. The dog was clearly starving. Emma could see that she had not eaten in days, possibly weeks. Her body was consuming itself to keep her babies alive. The dedication of this mother touched something deep in Emma's heart. She had learned about mother animals in school, how they would sacrifice everything for their children, but seeing it in real life was completely different. Emma ran back to the house as quietly as she could, not wanting to alarm her mother just yet. She grabbed some leftover chicken from the refrigerator and a bowl of water. When she returned to the tree, the dog was exactly where she had left her, too weak to move much. Emma placed the food and water within reach, and watched as the mother dog drank desperately but ate only small amounts, as if her stomach could no longer handle much food. As Emma sat with the dog, she began to notice movement in the animal's belly. The puppies were still alive and they were moving. The mother dog seemed to be fighting to stay conscious, and Emma realized that this was not just about hunger anymore. Something was seriously wrong. The dog's breathing was labored, and she kept looking at Emma with an expression that seemed to be asking for help. Emma's mind raced with worry and confusion. She was just a child, but she understood that this situation was beyond what she could handle alone. The dog needed real help, the kind that only adults could provide. But Emma also sensed that time was running out. The mother dog's condition was deteriorating rapidly, and her babies were depending on her survival. The dog tried to stand but collapsed back down, her legs too weak to support her weight. Emma gently stroked the animal's head, whispering soft words of comfort. She promised the dog that she would find help, that everything would be okay. The dog seemed to understand, looking directly into Emma's eyes with a gaze that was both grateful and pleading. Emma made a decision that would prove to be crucial. Instead of running to get her mother immediately, she chose to stay with the dog for a while longer. Something told her that the animal needed to know she was not alone, that someone cared about what happened to her and her babies. Emma talked to the dog in a gentle voice, telling her about school, about her family, about anything that came to mind. As the minutes passed, Emma began to notice that the dog's behavior was changing. She was becoming more restless, shifting position frequently despite her weakness. The movements in her belly were becoming more pronounced, and Emma suddenly realized what was happening. The puppies were coming, and they were coming now. The mother dog looked at Emma with an intensity that was both frightening and moving. Her eyes seemed to be communicating something important, something that Emma felt she needed to understand. The dog was asking for more than just food and water. She was asking for Emma to be there, to witness what was about to happen, to be part of something that would connect them forever. Emma felt a mixture of excitement and terror. She had never seen any animal give birth before, and she was not sure she was ready for such a responsibility. But the mother dog's trusting gaze gave her courage. Emma positioned herself where she could comfort the dog while staying out of the way of what nature needed to do. The first puppy arrived as the sun reached its highest point in the sky. Emma watched in amazement as the mother dog, despite her terrible condition, immediately began cleaning her baby and encouraging it to breathe. The tiny creature was so small it could fit in Emma's palm, but it was alive and moving. The mother's exhausted face showed a brief moment of joy and relief, but Emma could see that this birth was taking everything the mother dog had left. Her breathing became even more labored, and her movements were getting weaker with each passing moment. Emma realized that she was witnessing both the miracle of life and a tragedy unfolding at the same time. The mother dog was giving her last strength to bring her babies into the world. Emma knew she had to act fast. The dog needed immediate medical attention, and the puppies would need care that only a veterinarian could provide. But as she started to stand to run for help, the mother dog caught her eye one more time. In that look, Emma saw something that would haunt her for years to come. It was the look of a mother who knew she might not survive to raise her children, and who was entrusting them to the kindness of a stranger. The second puppy was born just as Emma heard her mother calling her name from the house. The moment of decision had arrived. Emma took one last look at the brave mother dog and her tiny babies, whispered a promise that she would bring help, and ran toward the house with her heart pounding. She had no idea that this moment would be the beginning of a story that would test her family's compassion and change their understanding of what it meant to care for those who could not care for themselves. The morning sun cast long shadows across the quiet suburban street when 8-year-old Emma first noticed the desperate whimpering coming from behind the old oak tree in her backyard. She had been playing with her dolls on the porch when the sound reached her ears, soft but persistent, like someone crying for help. Emma's mother was inside preparing breakfast, and her father had already left for work at the construction site. Emma slowly approached the source of the sound, her small feet crunching on the fallen autumn leaves. What she discovered behind the massive tree trunk would change her life forever. A skeletal dog, so thin that her ribs showed clearly through her matted brown fur, was lying on her side. The animal's eyes were filled with exhaustion and pain, but there was something else there too, a fierce determination that Emma could somehow sense even at her young age. The dog was clearly a mother. Her swollen belly and the way she positioned herself protectively told Emma that much, even though she was just a child. The poor creature's fur was dirty and tangled, suggesting she had been living rough for quite some time. Her paws were cracked and bleeding, indicating long journeys on hard surfaces. Despite her terrible condition, the dog's tail gave the weakest of wags when she saw Emma approaching. Emma knelt down carefully, remembering what her grandmother had taught her about approaching scared animals. She extended her hand slowly, palm up, allowing the dog to catch her scent. The mother dog lifted her head with great effort and sniffed Emma's fingers before gently licking them. It was a gesture of trust that brought tears to the little girl's eyes. The dog was clearly starving. Emma could see that she had not eaten in days, possibly weeks. Her body was consuming itself to keep her babies alive. The dedication of this mother touched something deep in Emma's heart. She had learned about mother animals in school, how they would sacrifice everything for their children, but seeing it in real life was completely different. Emma ran back to the house as quietly as she could, not wanting to alarm her mother just yet. She grabbed some leftover chicken from the refrigerator and a bowl of water. When she returned to the tree, the dog was exactly where she had left her, too weak to move much. Emma placed the food and water within reach, and watched as the mother dog drank desperately but ate only small amounts, as if her stomach could no longer handle much food. As Emma sat with the dog, she began to notice movement in the animal's belly. The puppies were still alive and they were moving. The mother dog seemed to be fighting to stay conscious, and Emma realized that this was not just about hunger anymore. Something was seriously wrong. The dog's breathing was labored and she kept looking at Emma with an expression that seemed to be asking for help. Emma's mind raced with worry and confusion. She was just a child, but she understood that this situation was beyond what she could handle alone. The dog needed real help, the kind that only adults could provide. But Emma also sensed that time was running out. The mother dog's condition was deteriorating rapidly, and her babies were depending on her survival. The dog tried to stand but collapsed back down, her legs too weak to support her weight. Emma gently stroked the animal's head, whispering soft words of comfort. She promised the dog that she would find help, that everything would be okay. The dog seemed to understand, looking directly into Emma's eyes with a gaze that was both grateful and pleading. Emma made a decision that would prove to be crucial. Instead of running to get her mother immediately, she chose to stay with the dog for a while longer. Something told her that the animal needed to know she was not alone, that someone cared about what happened to her and her babies. Emma talked to the dog in a gentle voice, telling her about school, about her family, about anything that came to mind. As the minutes passed, Emma began to notice that the dog's behavior was changing. She was becoming more restless, shifting position frequently despite her weakness. The movements in her belly were becoming more pronounced, and Emma suddenly realized what was happening. The puppies were coming, and they were coming now. The mother dog looked at Emma with an intensity that was both frightening and moving. Her eyes seemed to be communicating something important, something that Emma felt she needed to understand. The dog was asking for more than just food and water. She was asking for Emma to be there, to witness what was about to happen, to be part of something that would connect them forever. Emma felt a mixture of excitement and terror. She had never seen any animal give birth before, and she was not sure she was ready for such a responsibility. But the mother dog's trusting gaze gave her courage. Emma positioned herself where she could comfort the dog, while staying out of the way of what nature needed to do. The first puppy arrived as the sun reached its highest point in the sky. Emma watched in amazement as the mother dog, despite her terrible condition, immediately began cleaning her baby and encouraging it to breathe. The tiny creature was so small it could fit in Emma's palm, but it was alive and moving. The mother's exhausted face showed a brief moment of joy and relief, but Emma could see that this birth was taking everything the mother dog had left. Her breathing became even more labored, and her movements were getting weaker with each passing moment. Emma realized that she was witnessing both the miracle of life and a tragedy unfolding at the same time. The mother dog was giving her last strength to bring her babies into the world. Emma knew she had to act fast. The dog needed immediate medical attention, and the puppies would need care that only a veterinarian could provide. But as she started to stand to run for help, the mother dog caught her eye one more time. In that look, Emma saw something that would haunt her for years to come. It was the look of a mother who knew she might not survive to raise her children, and who was entrusting them to the kindness of a stranger. The second puppy was born just as Emma heard her mother calling her name from the house. The moment of decision had arrived. Emma took one last look at the brave mother dog and her tiny babies, whispered a promise that she would bring help, and ran toward the house with her heart pounding. She had no idea that this moment would be the beginning of a story that would test her family's compassion and change their understanding of what it meant to care for those who could not care for themselves. The eighth and final puppy was born just as the streetlights began to flicker on throughout the neighborhood. This delivery was the most challenging of all, requiring Dr. Martinez to use all his skill and experience to safely bring the baby into the world. The mother dog's strength was almost completely depleted, but she managed one final push that allowed her last puppy to be born alive. Though barely breathing, Dr. Martinez immediately began working on the tiny puppy, using a small oxygen mask and gentle stimulation to encourage stronger breathing. The baby was the smallest of all the litter, and its chances of survival seemed slim. Meanwhile, the mother dog lay exhausted but alert, her eyes fixed on her newest baby with an expression of desperate concern. Despite her own critical condition, her maternal instincts remained strong. Emma watched the veterinarian work on the tiny puppy while gently stroking the mother dog's head. The little girl whispered words of encouragement to both the mother and baby, her young voice filled with hope and determination. Emma had become deeply attached to this canine family over the course of the day, and the thought of losing any of them was unbearable to her. Sarah stood nearby with tears in her eyes, amazed by the mother dog's incredible strength and devotion. She had given birth to 8 puppies while suffering from severe malnutrition and exhaustion, yet she continued to worry about each of her babies. Sarah found herself thinking about her own experience as a mother and how she would feel in a similar situation of desperation and fear. Dr. Martinez finally managed to stabilize the smallest puppy's breathing, though the baby remained very weak. He carefully placed the puppy next to its mother, who immediately began the instinctive process of cleaning and warming her child. The veterinarian then turned his attention back to the mother dog, whose condition had become even more critical during the final delivery. The examination revealed what Dr. Martinez had feared most. The mother dog was suffering from severe complications related to malnutrition and the stress of giving birth. Her body had used every last reserve of energy to bring her baby safely into the world, and now she was paying the price. Her heart rate was irregular, her breathing was shallow, and her body temperature was dropping dangerously low. Dr. Martinez worked frantically to stabilize the mother dog's condition, administering medications and fluids while monitoring her vital signs closely. He explained to Sarah and Emma that the next few hours would be critical in determining whether the brave mother would survive her ordeal. The veterinarian's years of experience had taught him to be realistic about such situations, but he was clearly moved by this particular case. Emma refused to leave the mother dog's side, even when her own mother suggested she should come inside for dinner. The 8-year-old girl seemed to understand instinctively that the dog needed someone to stay with her, to let her know that her babies would be cared for no matter what happened. Emma's presence seemed to comfort the mother dog, who would open her eyes periodically to check that the little girl was still there. As the evening progressed, neighbors continued to arrive with offers of help and supplies. Mrs. Rodriguez brought a heating pad to keep the puppies warm, while Mr. Thompson offered to drive to the pet store to buy specialized puppy formula and feeding supplies. The community response was overwhelming, with people who had never met the dog or her rescuers coming together to help save these innocent lives. Dr. Martinez set up a temporary nursery area in Sarah's garage, complete with heating lamps, soft bedding, and monitoring equipment. The 8 puppies were carefully moved to this safe environment, though they remained close enough to their mother for nursing when she was strong enough. Each puppy was examined and weighed, with the veterinarian making notes about their individual conditions and needs. The puppies ranged in size and strength, with some appearing relatively healthy, while others showed signs of the malnutrition that had affected their mother. The smallest puppy, born last, required special attention and would need to be fed by hand if it was to survive. Emma immediately volunteered to help with this task, showing a natural ability to handle the delicate creature. Throughout the night, Dr. Martinez remained at the house monitoring both the mother dog and her puppies. Sarah and Emma took turns sitting with the mother, offering water and comfort while watching for any changes in her condition. The dog's breathing remained labored, and she seemed to drift in and out of consciousness. But she always responded to Emma's voice. Around midnight, the mother dog's condition took a turn for the worse. Her breathing became even more difficult, and she seemed to be struggling to stay conscious. Dr. Martinez increased her medications and fluids, but he warned Sarah and Emma that they needed to prepare for the possibility that the mother might not survive the night. The stress of giving birth while severely malnourished had simply been too much for her weakened body. Emma became very upset at this news, refusing to accept that the brave mother dog might die after fighting so hard to save her babies. The little girl crawled carefully next to the dog and whispered promises that her puppies would be loved and cared for, that their mother's sacrifice would not be in vain. The dog seemed to hear and understand, managing to lick Emma's hand with her dry tongue. Sarah called her husband at work to explain the situation, and he immediately arranged to come home early to help with the crisis. When David arrived at the house, he found his backyard transformed into an emergency veterinary clinic, with neighbors still arriving to offer assistance and his daughter refusing to leave the side of a dying dog she had known for less than 24 hours. David was initially overwhelmed by the situation, but when he saw the mother dog lying surrounded by her 8 tiny puppies, he understood why his family had become so invested in their survival. The dog's eyes held a combination of exhaustion, pain, and fierce maternal love that touched something deep in his heart. He knelt down next to Emma and gently stroked the mother dog's head, adding his voice to those offering comfort and encouragement. Dr. Martinez explained the situation to David, emphasizing that even if the mother dog survived the night, she would require weeks of intensive care and rehabilitation. The puppies would need round-the-clock attention for at least the first month of their lives, and there was no guarantee that all of them would survive. The financial and emotional commitment involved would be substantial, and the family needed to understand what they might be taking on. Sarah and David looked at each other, having a silent conversation that married couples often share. They both knew that their lives had changed forever when Emma discovered the mother dog behind their oak tree. There was no question of abandoning these animals now, regardless of the cost or effort involved. Emma had already made the decision for the family, and they would support her choice completely. As the night wore on, The mother dog's condition stabilized somewhat, though she remained very weak. Dr. Martinez cautiously optimistic that she might survive until morning, but he warned that the next several days would be crucial. The puppies continued to nurse when their mother was strong enough, but they also required supplemental feeding to ensure proper nutrition and growth. Emma finally fell asleep curled up next to the mother dog around 3 in the morning, her small hand resting gently on the animal's side. Sarah covered them both with a warm blanket, marveling at her daughter's compassion and determination. The sight of the exhausted child and the suffering mother dog sleeping peacefully together was both heartbreaking and beautiful. Dawn broke with a mixture of hope and uncertainty as Dr. Martinez checked on his patients. The mother dog had survived the night, though her condition remained critical. Her breathing was slightly stronger, and she had managed to nurse some of her puppies during the early morning hours. The veterinarian was cautiously optimistic, but he emphasized that they were far from being out of danger. Emma woke up still lying next to the mother dog, her small body stiff from sleeping on the garage floor. The first thing she did was check to make sure the dog was still breathing, relief washing over her face when she felt the gentle rise and fall of the animal's chest. The mother dog opened her eyes when she sensed Emma stirring, and for the first time since their first meeting, her tail gave a small but definite wag. The 8 puppies had made it through their first night, though their conditions varied significantly. The largest 3 were nursing regularly and seemed relatively strong, while the middle 3 required some assistance but were holding their own. The 2 smallest puppies, including the last one born, were struggling and would need intensive care to survive their critical first weeks of life. Dr. Martinez had arranged for a colleague to cover his regular appointments so he could continue monitoring the mother dog and her babies. He explained to Sarah and David that the next 72 hours would be crucial in determining which puppies would survive and whether the mother would recover enough to care for them properly. The family was facing a challenging period that would test their commitment and resources. Emma had already named all 8 puppies, despite her parents' gentle warnings about becoming too attached too quickly. The largest puppy became Hero because he had been born first and seemed to be leading the way for his siblings. The smallest became Hope because Emma said that was what they all needed to keep going. The others received names like Faith, Courage, Lucky, Miracle, Angel, and Brave, each reflecting Emma's positive outlook despite the serious situation. Sarah and David took turns staying home from work to help care for the expanding family. They had converted their garage into a full-time nursery, complete with temperature controls, feeding stations, and comfortable bedding. The setup looked more like a professional animal rescue facility than a suburban garage, but the family was determined to provide the best possible care. The mother dog, whom Emma had named Mama Grace for her dignity and strength, slowly began to show signs of improvement. Dr. Martinez adjusted her medications and feeding schedule, gradually increasing her nutrition while being careful not to overwhelm her damaged digestive system. Grace's eyes became more alert, and she started showing more interest in her surroundings and her babies. Community support continued to pour in as word spread about the family's rescue efforts. Local businesses donated supplies and volunteers offered to help with the round-the-clock feeding schedule that the puppies required. A local news station even sent a reporter to cover the story, though Sarah and David were careful to emphasize the serious nature of animal abandonment and the importance of spaying and neutering pets. Emma became an expert at bottle feeding the smallest puppies, working under Dr. Martinez's guidance to ensure they received proper nutrition. The 8-year-old showed remarkable patience and skill, spending hours each day carefully feeding Hope and Angel, who required the most assistance. Her dedication was inspiring to the adults around her, and even Dr. Martinez commented on her natural ability with the animals. As the days passed, Grace's physical condition continued to improve, though her recovery was slow and sometimes frustrating. She was able to stand for short periods and showed more interest in food, but she remained weak and needed assistance with many basic activities. The emotional bond between Grace and Emma grew stronger each day, with the dog clearly recognizing the little girl as her primary caregiver and protector. The puppies' personalities began to emerge as they grew stronger. Hero lived up to his name by being the most adventurous and vocal of the litter, while Hope surprised everyone by showing tremendous determination despite her tiny size. Courage and Faith were inseparable, always sleeping curled up together, while Lucky seemed to have an unusual ability to find the warmest spots in their enclosure. Dr. Martinez was amazed by the family's dedication and the progress that both Grace and her puppies were making. He had seen many cases of animal neglect and abandonment, but rarely had he witnessed such a positive outcome when the initial situation had been so dire. The combination of immediate medical care, devoted human attention, and community support had created an environment where healing could truly take place. However, not everything was going smoothly. Two of the middle-sized puppies, Miracle and Angel, developed respiratory infections that required additional treatment. Dr. Martinez increased his visits and prescribed antibiotics, but he warned the family that young puppies were particularly vulnerable to such complications. Emma was especially worried about Angel, who had been struggling since birth and seemed to be falling behind her siblings in growth and development. The financial costs of caring for Grace and her puppies were beginning to add up significantly. Veterinary bills, specialized food, medications, and supplies were straining the family's budget, though they never considered reducing the level of care they were providing. David picked up extra hours at work, while Sarah started a small fundraising effort among friends and neighbors to help cover the medical expenses. Emma's school performance initially suffered as she spent every free moment caring for the dogs, but her teachers were understanding when they learned about the situation. Some of Emma's classmates even organized a bake sale to raise money for puppy food and supplies. The 8-year-old girl was learning valuable lessons about responsibility, compassion, and the real cost of caring for others. Grace's emotional recovery seemed to parallel her physical improvement. She began showing more typical dog behaviors, such as wagging her tail when Emma arrived and showing excitement at feeding time. However, she remained protective and somewhat wary of strangers, suggesting that her experiences before arriving at Emma's house had been traumatic and had left lasting psychological effects. The veterinarian explained that Grace would likely always have some health issues related to her period of severe malnutrition. Her teeth were damaged, her coat might never fully recover its original thickness and shine, and she would need to be monitored for potential organ problems throughout her life. Despite these challenges, Dr. Martinez was optimistic that Grace could live a relatively normal and happy life with proper ongoing care. As the second week of care began, Emma's parents started discussing the long-term future of Grace and her puppies. While they were committed to seeing them through the immediate crisis, they needed to consider what would happen once the puppies were old enough to be separated from their mother. Finding homes for 8 puppies would be challenging, and they wanted to ensure that each one went to a family that would provide proper care and love. Emma had very strong opinions about keeping the entire family together, arguing that Grace and her babies had been through enough trauma and should not be separated. While her parents appreciated her emotional connection to the animals, they gently explained that caring for 9 dogs permanently would be impossible for their family. The conversation was difficult but necessary, as they needed to start planning for the puppies' futures while they were still young and adaptable. The story of Grace and her puppies had touched the hearts of many people in their community and beyond. Dr. Martinez reported that he had received calls from potential adopters as far away as neighboring states, all wanting to provide homes for the rescued animals. However, he emphasized the importance of careful screening to ensure that the puppies would go to responsible owners who understood the commitment involved in pet ownership. 3 weeks after Grace's arrival, the family faced their first major crisis when little Angel stopped eating and became lethargic. Dr. Martinez arrived within an hour of Sarah's urgent phone call, his expression serious as he examined the smallest puppy. Angel's breathing was shallow, her body temperature had dropped, and she was not responding to normal stimulation. The puppy that had already struggled the most was now fighting for her life. Emma refused to leave Angel's side as Dr. Martinez worked to stabilize the tiny creature. The veterinarian administered fluids and medications while explaining that puppies Angel's size and condition were particularly vulnerable to sudden health crises. Their immune systems were still developing, and any stress or illness could quickly become life-threatening. Emma held Angel gently in her small hands, willing the puppy to keep fighting. Grace seemed to sense that something was wrong with her smallest baby. Despite her own continued weakness, the mother dog became restless and kept trying to reach Angel. whimpering softly when she could not get close enough. Dr. Martinez allowed Grace to sniff and gently lick Angel, hoping that the mother's attention might help stimulate the failing puppy. The scene was heartbreaking, as Grace clearly understood that her baby was in serious trouble. The entire family maintained a vigil throughout the night, taking turns holding Angel and providing the constant warmth and attention she needed. Emma barely slept, checking on the puppy every few minutes and talking to her in encouraging whispers. The little girl had become so attached to Angel that the thought of losing her was devastating. But she remained determined to do everything possible to help the struggling puppy survive. By morning, Angel had stabilized somewhat, though she remained very weak. Dr. Martinez adjusted her medications and feeding schedule, emphasizing that the next few days would be critical. He praised Emma's dedication, but gently warned her that sometimes, despite everyone's best efforts, very small puppies simply could not overcome the challenges they faced. Emma listened solemnly but refused to give up hope. The crisis with Angel highlighted how precarious the situation remained for all the puppies. While Hero, Courage, Faith, and Lucky continued to thrive, Miracle and Brave were also showing signs of slower development that concerned the veterinarian. Grace's period of malnutrition during pregnancy had affected all her babies to some degree, and each puppy would need individual attention to reach their full potential. Emma's parents were amazed by their daughter's maturity and dedication throughout the crisis. The 8-year-old had shown a level of responsibility and compassion that was remarkable for someone her age. However, they also worried about the emotional toll that caring for such vulnerable animals was taking on their child. Emma had invested so much of herself in these dogs that any loss would be devastating for her. Community support became even more important during this difficult period. Neighbors organized a rotating schedule to help with the constant care the puppies required, allowing Sarah and David to return to work part-time while ensuring that Grace and her babies were never left alone. Mrs. Chen proved particularly helpful, having raised orphaned kittens years earlier and understanding the intensive care requirements. Dr. Martinez brought in a colleague who specialized in neonatal puppy care to consult on the cases of Angel, Miracle, and Brave. Dr. Lisa Park had years of experience with premature and at-risk puppies, and she provided valuable insights into specialized feeding techniques and developmental support. Her involvement gave everyone hope that even the weakest puppies might have a chance at normal, healthy lives. The specialized care regimen that Dr. Park recommended required even more time and attention than the family had been providing. Angel needed to be fed every 2 hours around the clock with a special high-calorie formula, while Miracle and Brave required additional supplements and physical therapy to encourage proper development. Emma eagerly learned all the new techniques, becoming skilled at the delicate procedures required to care for such tiny, vulnerable creatures. Grace's own recovery continued steadily, though slowly. She was now able to walk around the garage area and showed increasing interest in playing with toys and interacting with the family. Her coat was beginning to show signs of improvement, and she had gained enough weight that her ribs were no longer prominently visible. Most importantly, her eyes had regained the spark of life that had been dimmed by her ordeal. The bond between Grace and Emma had become extraordinary. The dog followed the little girl everywhere she was allowed to go, and Emma seemed to understand Grace's needs and moods with an almost telepathic connection. When Emma was at school, Grace would wait by the garage door, becoming excited and animated only when she heard Emma's voice returning home each afternoon. As the puppies entered their 4th week of life, their personalities became even more distinct. Hero had become the leader of the litter, always the first to try new foods and explore new areas of their enclosure. Courage and Faith remained inseparable, often communicating with each other through tiny whimpers and movements that seemed to have special meaning. Lucky lived up to her name by consistently avoiding the minor accidents and mishaps that affected her siblings. Hope, despite being the second smallest puppy, had shown remarkable resilience and determination. She had surpassed several of her larger siblings in development and had become particularly attached to Emma. The puppy would cry when Emma left and settle immediately when she returned, suggesting a bond that went beyond normal caregiver-pet relationships. The question of the puppy's future homes became more pressing as they grew stronger and more active. Emma had reluctantly accepted that her family could not keep all the dogs, but she had very specific ideas about what kind of homes would be suitable for each puppy. She wanted to personally interview potential adopters and ensure that each dog would be loved and cared for properly. Dr. Martinez and Dr. Park had compiled a list of pre-screened potential adopters who understood the special needs that some of these puppies might have throughout their lives. However, they emphasized that the final decisions about placement should wait until the puppies were at least 8 weeks old and had received their initial vaccinations. Emma created detailed profiles for each puppy, describing their personalities, preferences, and special needs. She drew pictures of each one and wrote stories about their individual characteristics, wanting to ensure that potential adopters would understand what made each puppy unique. Her parents were touched by her thoroughness and dedication to finding the perfect homes for Grace's babies. The local animal shelter offered to help with the adoption process, providing resources for background checks and home visits for potential adopters. The shelter director, Ms. Rodriguez, was impressed by the family's dedication and the quality of care the puppies had received. She commented that many professionally rescued animals did not receive the level of attention and love that Grace and her babies had experienced. Angel's condition continued to improve slowly but steadily under the intensive care regimen. Though she remained the smallest and most fragile of the litter, she had begun to show more energy and curiosity about her surroundings. Emma spent extra time with Angel each day, providing the additional stimulation and attention that Dr. Park recommended for her continued development. The financial burden of caring for 9 dogs was becoming significant, but the community response had been overwhelming. The local pet store donated food and supplies. A wealthy businessman in town paid for several veterinary visits, and Emma's school raised enough money through various fundraising activities to cover Angel's specialized medical needs. The generosity of neighbors and strangers had made it possible for the family to provide the level of care that Grace and her puppies required. Sarah and David found themselves learning about aspects of animal care they had never considered before. They studied canine nutrition, puppy development, and behavioral training to ensure they were providing the best possible environment for their temporary charges. The experience was transforming their entire family's understanding of the responsibility and rewards that came with caring for vulnerable animals. Grace had become increasingly protective of her puppies as they grew stronger and more active. She would carefully move any puppy that wandered too far from the group and showed signs of anxiety when strangers approached her babies. Dr. Martinez explained that this was normal maternal behavior, but it meant that the eventual separation from her puppies would be emotionally difficult for Grace as well as for Emma. The puppies had begun the weaning process, transitioning from nursing to eating solid food. This milestone was significant both for their development and for Grace's continued recovery, as nursing had been draining her limited energy reserves. Emma helped with the messy but rewarding process of teaching the puppies to eat from bowls, laughing at their clumsy attempts and celebrating each small success. As the 5th week began, all 8 puppies were not only surviving but thriving. Even Angel had reached developmental milestones that Dr. Park had been uncertain she would achieve. The transformation from the desperate, starving mother dog who had appeared behind the oak tree to this healthy, happy family of dogs was remarkable and inspiring to everyone who had been involved in their care. Emma's parents began discussing the possibility of keeping 1 or 2 of the puppies permanently, recognizing that their daughter's attachment to the animals was genuine and deep. They also knew that Grace would benefit from having at least one of her children remain with her, as the complete separation might be traumatic for a mother who had fought so hard to keep her babies alive. The story of Grace and her puppies had attracted attention from animal welfare organizations across the region. Several groups offered to help with ongoing medical costs and adoption services. Recognizing the family's exceptional dedication to animal rescue, Emma received letters from children at other schools who had been inspired by her story to help animals in their own communities. Dr. Martinez reflected on the case as one of the most rewarding of his career. He had seen the worst and best of human nature in his work with animals, but rarely had he witnessed such a complete transformation brought about by simple compassion and determination. The success of Grace's rescue and recovery would serve as an inspiration for other animal welfare efforts in the community. 6 weeks after Grace's dramatic arrival, The family faced the emotional challenge of beginning the adoption process for the puppies. Emma had grown so attached to each of the 8 babies that the thought of saying goodbye was almost unbearable. However, she also understood that finding loving homes for the puppies was the best way to honor Grace's sacrifice and ensure that all the dogs would have the chance for happy, healthy lives. The first potential adopters to visit were the Johnson family, who lived on a small farm outside town and were interested in Hero. Emma interviewed them thoroughly, asking detailed questions about their experience with dogs, their daily schedule, and how they planned to care for a puppy that might grow to be quite large. She was particularly concerned about whether they understood Hero's bold personality and would provide appropriate training and stimulation. Mrs. Johnson was charmed by Emma's serious approach to the adoption process and patiently answered all her questions. The family had raised dogs for many years and understood the commitment involved in proper pet ownership. They had a large fenced yard, experience with veterinary care, and children who were excited about welcoming a new puppy into their home. After a long conversation and a visit to see their farm, Emma reluctantly agreed that Hero would be happy with the Johnson family. The separation was more difficult than anyone had anticipated. Hero had been with his mother and siblings for his entire life, and being taken to a new environment was initially traumatic for the brave little puppy. Emma cried when the Johnsons left with Hero, and Grace spent the evening searching the garage for her missing baby, whimpering softly when she could not find him. The family realized that future adoptions would need to be handled even more carefully to minimize stress for everyone involved. Dr. Martinez suggested a gradual approach for the remaining adoptions, allowing potential families to visit multiple times before taking a puppy home. This would help the puppies become familiar with their new families, while still having the security of their mother and siblings nearby. It would also give Emma more time to ensure that each placement was truly the right match for both the puppy and the adoptive family. Courage and Faith presented a special challenge because they had never been separated and seemed to communicate with each other in ways that amazed the adults caring for them. Emma was determined that these 2 puppies should be adopted together, even though this would make finding a suitable home more difficult. She refused to consider any family that was not willing to take both puppies, arguing that their bond was too special to be broken. The search for a family willing to adopt 2 puppies led to the Williams family, who had recently lost their elderly dog and felt ready to welcome new pets into their home. Mr. and Mrs. Williams were retired and had plenty of time to devote to training and caring for 2 active puppies. Their grown children supported the decision and promised to help with veterinary costs and other expenses as needed. Emma was initially skeptical about the Williams family because they were older and she worried they might not have enough energy to keep up with 2 playful puppies. However, after several visits and long conversations, she began to see that their calm, patient approach might be exactly what Courage and Faith needed. The elderly couple had raised multiple dogs throughout their marriage and understood both the joys and challenges of pet ownership. Lucky's adoption was arranged with a young couple who had been trying to have children for several years and wanted a dog to help fill the void in their home. Emma was moved by their story and felt that Lucky's naturally cheerful disposition would bring happiness to their lives. The couple, Maria and James, had prepared extensively for pet ownership and had already puppy-proofed their home and purchased all necessary supplies. Miracle's case was more complex because her early health problems had left her with some ongoing developmental delays. Dr. Park had explained that Miracle would likely always be smaller than typical for her breed and might require special dietary considerations throughout her life. Emma was determined to find adopters who would view these challenges as opportunities to provide extra love and care, rather than as burdens. The perfect family for Miracle turned out to be the Patel family, whose teenage daughter had a disability and understood the importance of providing extra support for those who face challenges. Dr. Patel was a physician who was comfortable handling Miracle's medical needs, while their daughter Priya was excited about having a pet who, like herself, was special and required thoughtful care. Brave's adoption was arranged with a family who had specifically requested a puppy from Grace's litter after hearing their story. The Chen family, not related to their neighbor Mrs. Chen, had lost their dog in an accident and wanted to honor their pet's memory by providing a home for a rescued animal. Their teenage son had volunteered at animal shelters and understood the responsibility involved in caring for a dog with a potentially traumatic background. Hope's future remained uncertain because Emma had developed such a strong attachment to the second smallest puppy that she could not bear the thought of letting her go. Hope had become Emma's constant companion, sleeping in her room and following her around the house whenever possible. Sarah and David could see that the bond between their daughter and this particular puppy was extraordinary, and began seriously considering keeping Hope permanently. Angel, the smallest and most fragile puppy, presented the greatest challenge for adoption. Her ongoing health needs required potential adopters with significant resources and dedication. Several families had inquired about her, but Emma's standards for Angel's care were extremely high because of all the intensive attention the tiny puppy had required to survive her difficult first weeks of life. Grace's own future also needed to be considered as the puppies approached adoption age. While she had recovered remarkably well from her ordeal, she remained somewhat fearful of strangers and would likely do best in a quiet home environment. Emma could not imagine Grace living anywhere else but with their family, and her parents had already begun discussing the possibility of keeping the mother dog permanently. The process of screening potential adopters was time-consuming and emotionally exhausting for Emma and her parents. They visited the homes of prospective families, conducted multiple interviews, and required references from veterinarians and previous pet owners. The thoroughness of their process was appreciated by serious adopters but discouraged those who might not have provided appropriate care. Dr. Martinez and Dr. Park continued to monitor all the puppies' health and development as the adoption process proceeded. They provided detailed medical records and care instructions for each puppy, ensuring that new owners would understand their pet's history and any ongoing needs. The veterinarians also offered to remain available for consultation if any health issues arose after the adoptions were completed. Emma created detailed care packages for each adopted puppy, including favorite toys, blankets that smelled like their mother and siblings, and written instructions about feeding schedules and preferences. She wanted each puppy to have familiar items that would help them adjust to their new homes and remind their new families about the level of attention and love these special animals deserved. The emotional impact of the gradual separations was significant for the entire family. Sarah and David found themselves almost as attached to the puppies as Emma was, and saying goodbye to each one was difficult. Despite knowing they were going to good homes, Grace seemed to understand what was happening and became increasingly protective of her remaining babies as their numbers dwindled. As the adoption process continued, Emma began to understand that loving someone sometimes meant letting them go to places where they could be happy and thrive. The lesson was difficult for an 8-year-old to learn, but it was an important part of growing up and understanding the complexities of care and responsibility. Her parents were proud of her maturity and compassion throughout the challenging process. 8 weeks after Grace first appeared behind the oak tree, the family made their final decisions about the remaining puppies and their own future. Emma's parents had agreed to keep both Grace and Hope permanently, recognizing that separating this mother and daughter would be too traumatic for everyone involved. The decision brought tears of joy to Emma's eyes, as she had feared losing both of her closest animal companions. Angel's adoption required the most careful consideration of all. After weeks of interviews and home visits, Emma finally agreed to place the tiny puppy with Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a veterinarian who specialized in caring for animals with special needs. Dr. Mitchell had no children of her own, but had devoted her life to helping animals that others might consider unadoptable. She promised Emma that Angel would receive the best possible medical care and would be treated as a beloved family member rather than just another patient. The day of Angel's adoption was one of the most difficult Emma had ever experienced. The little girl had spent countless hours caring for the fragile puppy, feeding her by hand, keeping her warm, and encouraging her to keep fighting when her survival seemed uncertain. Angel had become a symbol of hope and perseverance for Emma, and letting her go felt like giving away a piece of her heart. Dr. Mitchell understood the significance of the moment and spent considerable time with Emma, discussing Angel's care requirements and promising to send regular updates about the puppy's progress. She also invited Emma to visit whenever she wanted, recognizing that the bond between the child and the puppy was too important to be severed completely. Emma carefully packed Angel's favorite blanket and a small toy that smelled like Grace, wanting her to have comfort items in her new home. Grace seemed to understand that her babies were leaving to start new lives, but the mother dog showed signs of depression as each puppy departed. She would search the garage for her missing children and appeared listless despite her improved physical health. Emma spent extra time with Grace, trying to comfort her and help her adjust to the dramatic changes in their small family. Hope's presence seemed to provide some comfort to Grace during this difficult transition period. The puppy had inherited her mother's gentle nature but showed more confidence and curiosity about the world around her. Hope had bonded strongly with Emma but also maintained a close relationship with Grace, often sleeping curled up against her mother even as she grew larger and more independent. The family established new routines as they adjusted to life with two permanent canine family members. Grace required ongoing veterinary care and a special diet to maintain her health, while Hope needed typical puppy training and socialization. Emma took primary responsibility for both dogs with help from her parents, and proved to be a natural dog trainer with patience and consistency that impressed Dr. Martinez. 6 months after the rescue, Emma received her first update letter from the Johnson family about Hero's progress. The brave puppy had grown into a confident young dog who loved farm life and had become an excellent companion for the Johnson children. Hero had learned to help with simple farm chores and had even helped locate a lost lamb during a spring storm. Emma was thrilled to learn that Hero's bold personality was being channeled into useful activities. Updates from other adoptive families continued to arrive throughout the following months, each one bringing Emma joy and confirmation that her careful selection process had been successful. Courage and faith were thriving with the Williams family, who reported that the two dogs had helped them cope with the loneliness of retirement. Lucky had indeed brought happiness to Maria and James, who credited her with helping them through a difficult period in their marriage. Miracle's progress with the Patel family was particularly gratifying to Emma. Despite her early health challenges, Miracle had grown into a happy, healthy dog who served as a therapy companion for Priya. The special bond between the girl and her dog had helped both of them gain confidence and had brought the entire Patel family closer together. Dr. Patel reported that caring for Miracle had taught his family valuable lessons about compassion and perseverance. Brave had settled well with the Chen family and had helped their teenage son process his grief over their previous dog's death. The boy had channeled his love for animals into volunteer work at local shelters, inspired by the story of Grace and her puppies. His parents credited Brave with helping their son develop empathy and purpose during a difficult adolescent period. Angel's updates from Dr. Mitchell were especially detailed and reassuring. Despite her ongoing health challenges, Angel had developed into a spirited little dog with a zest for life that surprised everyone who met her. Dr. Mitchell had taught Angel to assist with her veterinary practice, and the tiny dog had become a comfort to other animals undergoing medical treatment. Angel's survival and success had become an inspiration to veterinary students and animal rescue workers throughout the region. Grace's recovery had been remarkable. Though she retained some lasting effects from her period of starvation and trauma, her coat had regained much of its shine. She had reached a healthy weight and her energy levels had improved significantly. However, she remained somewhat wary of strangers and showed signs of anxiety when separated from Emma for extended periods. Dr. Martinez explained that these behavioral changes were common in animals who had experienced severe trauma and abandonment. Hope had grown into a beautiful young dog who combined her mother's gentle nature with a playful spirit that brought joy to everyone who met her. She had learned quickly and had become Emma's constant companion, accompanying the girl on walks to the park and even to some school events where pets were welcome. The bond between Emma and Hope was extraordinary, with each seeming to understand the other's moods and needs intuitively. Emma's experience with Grace and her puppies had profoundly changed her perspective on animals and responsibility. The 8-year-old had learned about sacrifice, dedication, and the real meaning of unconditional love. Her parents were amazed by their daughter's maturity and compassion, qualities that had been strengthened by her experience caring for vulnerable creatures who depended entirely on human kindness. The story of Grace's rescue had inspired others in the community to become involved in animal welfare efforts. Several neighbors had begun volunteering at local shelters, and the elementary school had started an annual fundraising drive for animal rescue organizations. Emma had become something of a local celebrity, speaking at school assemblies and community events about the importance of treating animals with compassion and respect. Dr. Martinez often used Grace's case as an example when teaching other veterinarians about the importance of community involvement in animal rescue efforts. He emphasized that the successful outcome had been possible only because of the combination of professional medical care, dedicated family involvement, and strong community support. The case had become a model for other rescue efforts in the region. 1 year after Grace's rescue, the family organized a reunion for all the adoptive families and their dogs. The gathering in the local park was emotional and joyful, as Emma was reunited with all 8 puppies, now grown into healthy, happy dogs. Grace seemed to recognize each of her children and greeted them with obvious affection, though she remained closest to Hope and Emma throughout the day. The reunion provided an opportunity for the adoptive families to share their experiences and for Emma to see the final results of her careful placement decisions. Each dog had found their perfect home and had enriched the lives of their new families in unexpected ways. The success of the adoptions was a testament to Emma's intuitive understanding of what each puppy needed and her determination to find the right match for every animal. As Emma watched Grace playing with Hope in their backyard that evening, she reflected on the journey that had begun with a desperate mother dog appearing behind their oak tree. The experience had taught her that sometimes the most important things in life came from unexpected places, and that caring for others, even when it was difficult and costly, was always worthwhile. Grace and Hope had become more than pets. They were family members who had taught the entire household about the power of love, determination, and hope.